Hey everybody, welcome to the Q&A session for Sunshine and Swampland, New Florida Shorts. If you're watching this on Eventive, you had a chance to see the films beforehand, and we're really super duper excited to be able to have 5 of the filmmakers that worked on those projects here with us today. So let me get started by introducing each one of them. So we'll start with Frank Volk. Hey man, welcome back, Frank.
Hey, how's it going? Great to be here.
So tell everybody what your film is and a little bit about what it is about.
Sure. So I did Sitting Still, which is a bit of an experimental piece about post-election anxiety, I guess, or just 2020, feeling 2020 digitally.
Man, well, it explains how nihilistic it is, I think, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is Angel's second time we've actually had one of your films in this program as well. So it's really nice to get a chance to catch up with you. There you go.
Yeah. Well, my name is Angel Barroeta. I'm from Venezuela. I live in Miami. And my film is called Moon Riders. And it's a slice of life it's the story of 2 teenagers in a wild night. Yeah. And thank you for having us. We really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm really happy to be sharing, this program with you guys.
Super excited to have it on the screen. It's going to look incredible if you guys are seeing it in the theater. If you're watching it at home, I hope you have a big ass television. So, well, Karina, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit of the film you've got and a little bit about it.
Yeah, so my film is called Short Shorts, and it's about an Arab American Muslim girl who essentially uses short shorts or clothing to shift her identities between her friends and her family.
Oh, awesome. And Ronald, welcome.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, repping the documentary aspect of the festival.
For sure.
So again, I love what your film is, and
sure. So the name of my film is Buscando Ana Veldford, which translates in English to Searching for Ana Veldford, and it's really just kind of like a juxtaposition of an immigrant story with the daily life of the subject, who happens to be my mother. So just sitting down and listening to her immigrant story, and then juxtaposing that with images of what her daily life is like.
Very cool. And then Giorgio, this movie, I love this movie. I mean, I love all these movies, but man, this is like the perfect use of like single space, like one performer. So, tell us a little bit about your film as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so Giorgio is my name. My film is essentially is uTransfer, a giant product of me watching too much Black Mirror for 2 months. And I kind of wanted to combine that with like a homage to my parents' immigration story to Florida. So it's kind of like a dark twist into what the hardships they had to go through to coming here. And it was my last film in Florida before coming to Brooklyn. So it was like a nice goodbye for a little bit. So yeah, and thank you for the kind.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about it for sure a little bit more. I'm really excited to have you guys on here. This program to me means a lot. It's a program that we reinvented a couple of years ago, taking the Best of Brouhaha program, which is a student film showcase that Enzion Theater does in the fall every year around Thanksgiving. And we used to just port essentially 90 minutes of that 2-day mini festival together to create this program. But a little while ago, we reinvented this into Sunshine and Swampland and sort of to take advantage of really showcasing filmmakers that are working in the state today, or apparently have migrated to Brooklyn, because that's going to be too, yeah, that's fair. I respect that. But there's just, it's not that the stuff that's coming out of the college circuit and the high school filmmaking isn't great, because there's some phenomenal stuff in there, and Frank's at the University of Central Florida. It's just that we felt like there was a better opportunity to really dig beneath the surface of what's getting produced outside of the film school segment and really look at stories that are kind of unique, especially films with like a real Florida flavor to them as well. So it makes total sense that I'm going to start about Frank's. Want to ask about Sitting Still, which is shot like in a house and has no, is experimental in nature. But Frank's you've been to the festival before, but as an animator. So
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I want to know to begin with is, what made you decide to go? Because obviously, if you're locked in lockdown, you could have just drawn. So what made
and
you?
I did a lot, but no, I mean, I was drawn to animation and experimental because big film sets with tons of crew kind of freaked me out a little bit. But yeah, so I was always pursuing both of those, and I went to school for film and computer science. So I'd always been messing around with the ways that I can use code and break apart images and put them back together. And this really grew out of I had built this Java program that takes images, breaks them down pixel by pixel into data, and then uses pointillism to recreate them. So every frame is recreated with single white pixels and black pixels, and there's no gradient of gray there. There's just white pixels and black pixels and higher and lower densities. And so then I was experimenting around with what looks good, what doesn't look good, and I got on this kind of single point light, high contrast imagery that really pops when you run it through the filter. And so then I covered my room in trash bags and got my friend Nico over and my buddy who knows how to use a camera pretty good, and we figured out something to film.
Yeah, it's really unique. The closest thing that we actually saw to it in the festival this year actually is an entirely different technique that comes from that same kind of base idea, which is the narrative or the animation competition program has a film that was shot entirely using LiDAR technique. And they had to borrow the entire computer system from like a company that I think manufactures the driving without your hands thing on a car. To figure out how to animate themselves using LiDAR. But what I love about it is it's sort of what Sitting Still does is that it's the ultimate impressionism like movie. Like everything in it's almost unintelligible as to what's actually occurring. But the further you step back, and of course, if you get a chance to see this in the program on the big screen, I think the audience will be able to be a little bit more even enveloped in sort of like the aggressive insanity of the movie, because obviously the audio on it also again is very like oof.
Yeah, I hope so. Because one of the biggest frustrations with the program is that the program that I wrote is that when you upload it, the way that video compression works, it all gets like it looks like a low quality JPEG or something like that, because it's not used to. There's no blotches of solid white in there. The highest the density get is a 1-to-1, so it's checkerboarded white and black, and a video compression just freaks out and doesn't know what to do with that, and just like chomps it down. So it'll be nice to see the high quality MOV on the big screen.
Nice. So let me hop over to Angel with Wound Riders. So last year in this program, we actually featured Diva and Astro, your last film, and I'm struck by how dissimilar and similar these two films are. So for the background, for anybody who saw Diva and Astro, the entire film is shot incredibly far away and essentially very little dialogue, discernible dialogue, as we witness kind of everything that's going on in the street corner. This film is hyper kinetic. The camera is moving nonstop, running through the club, following this girl. But again, a movie with essentially no discernible dialogue until really the very end. So you have a style, but you sort of like just went to the opposite ends of the base level of that style. So I'm curious as to, getting into filmmaking and then kind of coming to the vision that you have, because these movies are spectacularly made.
Well, thank you very much. I have to start saying that I'm a cinematographer. That's what I do for a living. And I started directing just because I needed to do something different to what I was shooting for somebody else. So that's somehow a big motivation that I realize now, that when I try to understand what are we doing, and also I'm a big believer of not saying with words what you can do with images, right? So with that basic things, always trying to experiment to see, you know, how we can push the envelope or the image or the storytelling in different ways. And so I think that's our motivation somehow. Yeah. And also to experiment to see what can we do. Also I think like when there's it depends on the story, of course, but
yeah,
sometimes when there's no dialogue, so there's not too much information that it, you know, people start like trying to get more into like to pay attention what's going on, you know, because they have to kind of discover what's going on, or even sometimes they think that the audio is bad or something, so they start going closer and closer and closer to trying to understand what's going on. And I think that's somehow also a hook, no? And and we were screening once Diva Nastro, and the audience in the big theater, they were sitting, no, and nothing happened, no sound. They're standing like moving forward, you know, and grabbing this, what's going on here, you know. And then and it was something that we thought somehow it interacts with the people.
Yeah.
And we done three films like this, and I don't know, I think the next one we're gonna do a lot of dialogue.
I love it. The next one will be your David Mamet film. You just put the camera there, everybody just talks nonstop. But one of the things about this is obviously casting is key in the film, and your lead actress Baker, who we've had we played it last year in the festival in this film Fairchild, is incredibly expressive. Just what she can do in her eyes is kind of shockingly amazing. So just it's really just a chance to say how amazing she is as a performer. So.
She is. We found her literally through Instagram, and she was playing both films at the same time.
At the same time?
Yeah, almost at the same time. And it was she's a natural, you know, like she's more like, I don't know, I went with her because she looks very young.
Yeah, she does.
And then when she came to the casting, she killed it, and I was like, oh my god. And well, I don't know, the audience have seen this, if they're watching us, they seen the film?
Yeah, hopefully they're not watching the Q&A before they watched all the movies. So yeah, it's playing at the end of the Q&A block, although theoretically you can circumvent that and go to it. Like,
what happened is we had a cast for the sister before.
Yeah.
We had the sister.
Yeah.
And then she came auditioning for the sister, and we saw her, and now she was the younger sister. And we were, wow, now we have to replace the sister that we have, because it's so amazing. We have to look for somebody that looks like her somehow, you know, that has the same. So it was a big change at the end of, you know, almost before filming, but I think it was necessary, you know. She was really amazing.
Your casts are great. The people that you've got, just background, the drug dealers, the creepy guys at the bar, like, it's just like, I always talk about, you know, getting faces. And I was like, man, like, I'm in a Miami plenty. And it's like, it's very Miami. The short is super Miami for sure. But also it's just like, man, this guy, like, Central Casting is losing their mind over how good these people look. So we'll talk some more about it, I'm sure, coming up. But let me come on to Karina. So this film came through a system of a program we use with Central Florida Film Slam, which is a program I advise on, program by Lorraine Sovereign. And it allows filmmakers to play at NZN ahead of time, audience awards, the best film of that program. Those go to the selection committee of the Florida Film Festival, and we choose one of those movies to come in, play in this category. And Short Shorts spoke a lot to both the audience, obviously, who voted it the best film of that month, but also to me, since I grew up in Wekiva.
Oh my God.
So, like, not born, I was born in Kentucky, but I did grow up in Central Florida and Wekiva, so it's shot there. So I was like, oh, this is like coming home to me. But I want to talk, this is such an amazingly personal story. And when I tell it people, I talk about this duality that obviously exists inside Muslim culture between conservative and being more exposed but also is really about, it's universal in the idea of like having to act one way for your parents and one way for your friends, but not actually being really super comfortable doing either one of those.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the ideas that I really tried to hit home, just the universality of, not being able to meet your parents' expectations. Because I think everybody can relate to that, whatever culture you're from, whatever religion you're from. And just within the Muslim religion in general, like I wanted it to also be very clear to the fact that like she wasn't necessarily struggling with her parents, like they weren't really like physically enforcing anything upon her. I think it was just that idea of like what would make them happy and how to make them happy, and sort of her internal struggle was more important, just wanting to meet their expectations and also wanting to fit in with her friends and look like what her friends look like. And the idea that also your peers can pressure you sometimes more than your family.
Oh, I think this
your
is totally
environment,
true.
your peers. Yeah. So I think there is also that misconception and maybe even stereotype that, Muslim families sort of like force or pressure you to do something. But it's like sometimes I honestly feel like my friends pressure me to do things more than my parents. So I definitely wanted to make that very clear as well in the film.
Yeah, one of the things that the movie does extraordinarily well is that I think it uses the camera almost voyeuristically to linger on the moments that are uncomfortable. That again allows the film and the audience to say things that the character doesn't have to say.
Right. Yeah, I definitely had very minimal dialogue for the main character, just because I also just wanted the audience to sort of, project their own like ideas and emotions. And especially the end, there was very much things left unsaid on purpose. And I left it in sort of a gray area, mostly because, I think there's this idea that her routine is very unfulfilling and that she's sort of on this coming of age journey where she doesn't really know what she wants to do yet. She doesn't really know who she wants to listen to or how she wants to dress. And she's sort of in this in-between stage of figuring out like who she is. So yeah, I definitely left out dialogue just because I wanted the audience to have their own ideas about her journey.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you really quickly before we move on to the next person is that, and just because I get a lot of this and a large number of the people that attend this, and I imagine will be watching this, will be film school students that are working in Central Florida, just because we have so many film schools in the area. And one of the biggest struggles that of the years that I've worked on Central Florida Film Slam and on the film festival that I've talked to about filmmakers is casting in Orlando or in the Central Florida region. Obviously, this is not a huge production hub unless you're shooting commercials or you're working at Disney. And that's all very, very different than usually working on a movie. But your casts, even though there are it isn't a dialogue heavy movie, all have this incredible natural chemistry with each other. So I'd like to know how you put them together, where you found them.
Yeah, for my cast, it was very interesting because we casted actually in New York. But you would think even that, New York will have a bigger database of either like Arab actors, Arab American, Muslim actors, or even just for the friend group. But it was very hard still, like specifically for casting like the parents. And I actually played the main role just because we had such a hard time finding someone. And I love to cast to likeness. Like I really wanted to cast, within those identities, just because I want to give opportunities and I want the representation to be authentic. So I think that's just a bigger problem to highlight in general, just about the lack of, I guess, maybe of a database for Arab and Muslim actors and actresses. Casting kids is always very, very difficult as well. We actually had to get a casting person just because we had such a hard time doing that, even through Facebook groups. Like we really tried the most. And I actually ended up having to cast the girl who played me from younger times I posted in like one of our mosque like Facebook groups, and I just said, hey, we're looking for, this age, and parents ended up contacting me. So I think Facebook groups are very useful, especially if there's certain like locations or very specific things you're looking for, just to target Facebook groups, but really to think outside the box, because I think just casting no matter where you are is very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about that Facebook casting, Instagram casting. I think the idea of reaching out to the community through your mosque is a really good idea as well. I know that my friend Emran had been working on sort of like a pilot for a Muslim American sitcom, and he was having the hardest time in Central Florida doing that. So eventually he just was like, I'm moving to LA, man. So he totally moved to LA. They're still working on it, but I'll tell you, the pilot script's great. So I really hope it gets that picked up.
Awesome.
I'm going to move on to Ronald as well. This is, this program tries to represent animation, live action, documentary, experimental. We want to show people what is happening in the state as opposed to just giving everybody, 10 narrative shorts, about ennui or whatever it is that we're all making movies about in 2020. But this movie touched me a lot. First, it's beautifully shot. It's like it's almost ethereal, the way that you're telling the story. And it has a little bit of an experimental avant-garde bent to it. So you mentioned before that this is your mother.
Yeah.
So
That's
obviously it was hard to find her, I imagine.
Yeah, I had to go into different rooms in the house and stuff. It was difficult.
But why? There is a couple of stories in this program that deal with the immigrant experience, and they do. Experimental has another film that sort of deals with Puerto Rican immigration in the 1950s called Morning Sickness in the USA. But I'd like to talk to you about, documentary filmmaking comes from such a more personal place. Why you wanted to tell the story.
So I grew up listening to, the film is very short. It's about 6 minutes long. But
Hold on a second. I'm freezing.
that
Everything
I had
is
with my
freezing.
mother, except my mom, and smoking a cigarette and reading a book. Sorry, my throat's a little dry, or rather like a little sore. This lady smoking a cigarette, reading a book in her front yard or in her front porch. You would never know the insanity that had to occur for her to just have those 30 seconds apiece.
Yeah.
And how she had to dedicate herself wholly to something that seems just unreasonable and impossible. And so I thought, like, Ulite Arts, which is an arts organization in Miami, commissioned, I think it was 11 filmmakers to make stuff at home during, like, in the heat of lockdown, like April or something, or May. And they were like, make something at home. And so I had kind of like, 1 second, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I had, sorry, I'm literally on set right now, so I had to find a route. I'm sorry?
No, I'm freezing up here. Hang on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're clean right now. Oh, yes. Sorry.
Okay,
I know
cool.
that's me. Something's been going really weird today.
No worries. So I kind of had to make this short at home, and I figured, well, let me grab my phone and start shooting everything I could find. And it took 5 seconds for me to realize that was stupid. Let me shoot the people who matter the most to me in the world. And so I started filming my mother, just smoking cigarettes and talking on the phone and meeting and greeting my father when he got home. And then I figured, well, let me talk to my mother about something. And I caught her smoking a cigarette in the front porch. And it occurred to me how that was her dream. Like, that was a goal of hers. And that it took 30 years to get there, to just find a couple moments of peace in the morning. And that was very meaningful to me.
Yeah, it's really a very powerful thought. I mean, this idea of going through so much just to be able to have peace.
Right. Yeah. For sure. I also thought it was interesting that I think that if you grow up in an immigrant community, or if you're the kid of immigrants, and there's plenty of things that immigrants can't talk about. there was a lot of moments where I would ask my mother a question and she would look up at the boom and then she would look at me. And so it's like, okay, let's move on to something else. And sometimes I knew the answer to that question and I thought it would be interesting, but she was like, no. And so it was a lot of really interesting stuff, but really my mom's, a lot of people have come up to me and been like, yeah, your writing on that was really good. And I was like, I didn't write anything. She just talks that way. Like she speaks, to steal a line from a really great movie, Trumbo, she speaks like everything she says is going to be etched into stone.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just how she manages to talk. It was a real pleasure to be able to spend time with her. I think that quarantine and making this film really brought us together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That line is that's a pointed line. It reminds me of when I'm growing up, my friend Frank's abuelita, she was from Cuba, and she didn't speak a ton of English, but when she would say something, it was like, oh shit, write that down.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, she says stuff like, there's one point in the film where I asked her, like, tell me about like the practical reason why you came here. And she starts talking about it, then she ends that whole answer with something like, and I told your father, I'm with you, you're not by yourself, I will follow you to the ends of the earth. And I was like, who talks like that? Like, that's so, it's such a weird way to speak, but she speaks very dramatically. It's very beautiful.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Giorgio, we talked about this just briefly in the introduction, but one of the things that I continually talk to film school students about when they ask me for some reason, like I have any level of expertise at all, like what you should do to make a movie. And I always try to explain to people that you should, first of all, I always, like you should make like 20 movies and then don't show any of those to anybody. But the second thing I tell them is like, and I constantly show shorts over the years that we've programmed to them that demonstrate it. And this movie is going to eventually go into my rotation of movies I show film school students, which is how to make essentially a perfect story-driven narrative with what is essentially, and I don't know that you for all I know, you can tell me you spent $100,000 making the movie. I'll believe you, but I also feel if you spent like a $5.25 for like some Taco Bell for lunch and called that like crafty, like that would be like my vibe on this movie, because it's just a perfectly situated short, one location, really good performance, really interesting story. So I want to know about conceiving the story more than I even want to know about the execution of it, which is, why, do this, because it's so well done. Thank
you. First of all, Ronald's Q&A session there almost made me cry. Now you're going to make me cry from all the nice words. But yeah, so it's exactly that. I was making a lot of ambitious films coming out of film school in 2017. And then I kind of lost myself in the sauce. And I was like, it needs this budget, it needs this many people. And I was like, what am I doing? And it's exactly what you said, like that would be my biggest advice to any filmmaker, is to find a way to minimize everything and to find the people that you trust the most in each aspect of your film. From the like, what's 6-7 things you need, find the people you trust for it. And that's how it happened. And then, like I said earlier, I was watching a lot of Black Mirror and was obsessed with The Master at the time, Joaquin Phoenix, his performance in that. So those two just kept rattling back in my head. And I just wrote it one day and told my cinematographer, I was like, I'm leaving in a couple of months. Do you think we could make this? And he was like, let's do it. Let's get it done. And so, yeah, from there, we've started grabbing the perfect people through the years that I've met that would do their job. And that's how it kind of happened. Like, thankfully, the people around me were talented and made my writing look okay.
No, I mean, to me, the movie lives or dies by the script. It's just like,
right.
And it also is interesting because the movie does addresses immigration, but it also addresses the criminal justice system in the United States. There's so much going on inside of a movie that is ostensibly just a guy staring at like a camera, like talking.
What I'd like to tell people is, if you saw footage of what we were doing in my mom's house just for that weekend, people would think we were insane, because it's just me talking to a wall. Yeah. And I was like, well, this looks like a disaster. But yeah, that's essentially what it was, a weekend of that. But yeah, it was a lot of on set. We were like, is this even gonna work?
Yeah.
And then thankfully in post, our brilliant VFX artist who solo did this, Marco Maldera, we'll give him all the credit, because again, without that, you don't buy the world. And then
there's, obviously
sound designer. Yeah. So like I said, I can't be any more thankful for like the 12 people that jumped on this and were like, yeah, we'd love to tell this story.
Yeah, it's really good. The other thing that it really took me the first time I watched it is that obviously Pierce, there's this, the things on his neck, but you never fully explained that, but you figure it out on like the next loop, and then the loop after, you're like, oh shit, like it's just like this little aside at the beginning that just seems like, oh, that was an interesting choice to like just kind of put a stick of Band-Aid on him, but then like you find out what's going on as it goes on and on. It's really.
Yeah, originally it was supposed to be this I'm sorry, SFX like makeup, and we were like, we can't do that. We don't know anybody to do that, so we're like, let's get Band-Aids. Way cheaper.
Like it just works really well.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, let me open this up, kind of let everybody have at each other. I know for the most part, you guys have seen each other's movies. We had an issue with the link on Ronald's film. He's going to shoot it out to everybody too. After this is over, if you guys want to take a look at it. But yeah, I would love.
Karina, I just have a question for you, if you don't mind. So your film I immediately was like, this cinematography should go down into one of like, the beautiful Florida cinematography from like Florida Project, Moonlight. If you guys saw the new A24 movie trailer for Zola, I was like, there are certain movies that captures Florida really well. And your film did that. What was the approach to whether the grade or the actual shoot to your cinematographer? What was the approach to that? Like, I'm curious because I kind of want to steal.
Yeah, I mean, my cinematographer was really brilliant. And to be transparent, this was my first film just ever. I had zero production experience, and I didn't even really go to film school. I studied like film theory. So I think just having a DP that really knew their stuff, and they're really cool. They're non-binary, they're Muslim, and their name is Nadia Gilbert, and they just really knew their shit basically. And they're really good at guiding me and helping me as a director. So it was very much a collaboration. So I would credit them, which is really those beautiful visuals of Florida. And Florida, I think someone was telling me just in general, like just the Florida landscape, like gives you so much already like to work for. You just put a camera there, and Florida is just so gorgeous. We shot at Wekiva Springs. Like we had some beautiful locations. And just coloring also, I think really helped bring almost, I guess, that appeal of other Florida films to light. Because even with something like the Florida Project, I think color was also very, very much key to bringing this sort of like magical motel like visual to light. So yeah, I think it was a combination of just a very talented DP and also just a really talented colorist. And again, Florida is gorgeous. I mean,
Another thing about shooting in Florida, you have to remember is you mentioned the colorist at the end. Is first of all, the Magic Castle Hotel is that purple, like in real life. It's aggressively purple. It really is. It's aggressively purple. But one of the things is we do see a lot of films that take advantage of being able to shoot in and around the parks areas of Florida and things like that. Is you still do you have to have a really good colorist because you're dealing with a lot of depth in all of those pictures too. And that's one of the things that I did kind of take away. I've seen Wekiva Springs, the basin shot in a million things, and yours was one of the few where it did feel like you could walk out and be there, in it. It was not flat. It wasn't flat. It can be flat because sometimes the way it is, it's all overhung, so everything's diffused, but it can also look a little washed out if it's not graded really well. So.
Wow,
so is yours
my DP for sure.
So is your cinematographer based here, or do we have to like go up to Brooklyn and steal them?
Yeah, they're based in Brooklyn.
I could steal them.
Their contact, yeah, I could easily plug in their contact for you, seriously, because they're very, very talented. They know their stuff. Awesome. I can do that for sure.
All right. Well, again, you guys shoot some questions back and forth to each other. Don't wait for my permission. What do you think?
Angel, I have one for you. So you're mainly a DP, you said, correct? And then you transitioned to directing recently. As you're directing, have you learned anything new as a cinematographer, as a director? Does that make sense? Because I feel like as we go on, everybody wants to kind of try something just so we can learn something overall as a filmmaker. Is there anything that you learned as a director that you can use as a DP?
Yeah, totally. A lot, especially when, sometimes as a cinematographer, you have your own, how can I say, your point of view or what you everybody, like the cinematographer, and the, well, everybody in the crew, but let's say the director and maybe the production designer, we all have our idea how to tell a story, you know, and it's the director who coordinates and you know, he decides the way the things goes. But sometimes, you know, as a cinematographer, you think it needs to be done like this, with these lenses, with these angles and stuff like that. But once you get on editing room, which is normally what the director does, or when you have to pay attention to the characters, to the actors, you know, their opinions, stuff like that, you know, you understand that it's a way more complicated, not complicated, but it's more, how can I say, the work is way bigger than just
It's bigger, yeah.
making it look good or make the
Yeah.
people do something, you know, which is what the cinematographer normally does. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I really love the opportunity of learning. And you know, I was once I was a technician, and I was learning from DPs. You know, I used to work for them, and I was learning from them. When I decided to be a DP, now it's more complicated. Now you have to learn from your mistakes, you know, or watching movies,
Right.
stuff like that, you know, because you don't have more cinematographers that can teach you something. So I started
Absolutely, yeah.
the directors, you know, as a learning tool. You know, what do they need, what's going on, and you know, how to tell the story, how to talk to an actor, you know, how to get
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
point of view. So it's fascinating, and now I'm in love with this. And you know, I still want to be a better cinematographer, and I think like having the opportunity of directing, it really helps me to see from above.
The
No,
scope of it. Yeah.
it's way bigger. So it's
Yeah.
really
Very awesome.
Awesome.
I actually have something I want to ask Ronald. Something that you said actually really stuck with me, with the idea of, you know, sometimes you would ask your mom questions and she would default, I guess, to almost like silence or not wanting to talk about certain things, which I feel like is also with my dad. He's also an immigrant. He's from Syria. And I feel very much the same way about this default into like silence, or like, you know, wanting to keep some things to themselves. So I guess my question is like, one, what would you like attribute that sort of like maybe pattern to? And two, like, how did you get around that when you were asking her questions, or what was your strategy with how you would ask her questions? Yeah.
So thanks for the question. That's a really interesting question. So there's some questions I can't ask because there's some information that I can't share. And so sometimes I think that most immigrants understand this this phenomena, especially if you're like the child of an immigrant. I grew up in Miami. I live in Miami. Both my parents are immigrants. I was the first American in my entire family. There's not always access to reality in that identity. Sometimes, sometimes you have to kind of like understand the difference between the story we tell and the story we experience. And so you have to ask a question that maybe takes you down that rabbit hole. It was very clear to me that it was like, we can't talk about that. And I can't tell you what those questions are because I can't tell you what those answers are. But I think that that's just part of being an immigrant, especially in the last 30, 35 years, 35, 40 years. Like, if you've had to memorize 2 sets of birthdays, you might know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I think that sometimes I would ask her a question and she would give me an answer that sounded good. And that was hard because it was like, okay, how do I ask my mother a question that may make it sound like I'm implying something hurtful? A good example of that question was at the end of the movie, I asked her if it was worth it, and she gives me an answer. I didn't have the ability to put her full answer in, but it took me about 2 days to be able to ask her that question in a way that she could answer honestly. And when I asked her, was it worth it? You know, we went through all this shit to try and get, you know, 5 minutes to yourself. She said, it depends. If you ask me as a mother, absolutely, it's worth it 100%. Both my brother and myself, we make money making art. We get to do what we want. And we have the privilege of not having to work for other people. We just work for ourselves. And that is a dream for her. But then when I ask her, like, is it worth it for you as a person, as an individual? She was like, no. And that is very, arriving at that and attempting to get that answer from her without scathing her, breaking her, or hurting her in any kind of way took a lot of like thought, and it was rather difficult, to be honest. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you. There's definitely, it's really hard to ask certain kinds of questions, especially to your family. But I do think that from it, we understood better, like what we owe to each other and what responsibilities we have of each other. And that made us a lot closer. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. I feel like I just ranted.
No,
I'm
Oh
sorry.
man.
I think I really appreciate like the courage and sensitivity it even takes to go there with someone, you know, that's so close to you.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. I mean, like, I'm sure you have the same experience with your father. I think you've done him the benefit of not putting it on camera, probably. My mother doesn't have the same thing to say.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I think maybe even like one day I'd want to do a doc, maybe about his experiences. So it's very interesting to me to like learn like how you went about it, and I guess
Yeah,
to be involved.
it's definitely not even most, the entire doc was found in post. So like everything was shot and recorded, and I trusted that I would find something as something that felt sincere, because she was just so incredibly sincere when she was talking to me. But that was my first documentary, actually, in the directing chair. I make narrative films, and so I think the reason why it was hard for me to find things to shoot, it was kind of like experimental. Tim was talking about how it has this experimental elements. It's mostly because I don't usually make documentaries, and so I was like, well, I don't really want to just show someone sitting down. I want to be able to explore kind of like what it is that this person is in what context.
Yeah.
But thank you for your question. Also, your film was really, really personal and beautiful too.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
That's wonderful.
I
Well,
really
thank
enjoyed that.
Well, I would love to ask maybe just everybody one last question, just as we wrap up. Just what you all are working on next. And we can start with Frank on. I know, Frank, you have another project that is in the similar style too.
Yeah, I had a project called Do Not Be Afraid that was with the Sunspot Cinema Collective, and they recently played it on their virtual festival or exhibition. I'm not sure what it's called, but yeah, I made a short film called Lava Lamp. That's a 35-minute psychedelic painted rotoscope just experiment that I sent out to festivals. But right now I'm working on a bigger animated project called Hot Dogs, which is about hot dogs.
I'm so in.
It's not.
I'm already invested.
It's not literal at all. Really.
No, not at all.
Awesome. Angel, what about you?
Well, basically, as I say, I do the cinematography. I'm working in a couple projects right now. I'm shooting a TV series for Prime that it's called Gravesend. It's coming from Brooklyn, actually.
Oh.
It's a mob story from the 80s.
Oh, cool.
And there's in Miami. So that's what I'm working. But my personal projects, I've been writing a script for maybe 3 years already. And, I question myself so much that I get stuck. But hopefully I will be able to pass that what's the name, that zone and make it happen. But the cool thing is, during this time that I've been writing, I've been doing shorts like Moonriders and Viva Astro, that they are all related somehow.
Yeah.
If maybe some of them, because I also did one called Noah, which is I will send you guys that. I would love to get your opinion. That was 3 years ago, but they're all in the same world.
Yeah, I can see that. You do have kind of a world.
Connected by characters or by style, no? So I'm trying to experiment all my ideas that I have for the feature film, and in the meantime, you know, just do little pieces in short films.
Awesome. That's
All right.
fantastic. What about you, Karina?
Yeah, I'm actually part of a fellowship right now with the Jacob Burns Film Center. So they're supporting me through 2 short films. So I shot a short doc, basically interviewing Middle Eastern, North African women and about how their sexuality was influenced by their culture and religion growing up. So that's in post. And then I shot a narrative that's also in post. And it's basically about 2 Arab American Muslim sisters and their parents, and just about like the intergenerational disconnect between like the new generation, the old generation. So yeah, that's also in post. So just 2 projects in post that I'm working on.
Very cool. Very cool. Giorgio, what about you?
Got a couple. I'm post coordinating a show for Apple TV, and also for my personal stuff, I'm in post for another short film. My first short that I shot here in New York, while uTransfer was my homage and send off to my my parents and their immigration story, this one's a love letter to my younger brother. So I'm kind of just trying to piece my family together in my movies. So yeah, so this should be, we're trying to get into festivals next month. So hopefully post will be done.
Very cool.
And so.
Well, we look forward to seeing all you guys' new work. Ronald, what about you?
I am literally on set. Like I am.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. I'm in a green room and my AD is the one who came in a second ago and was like, hey, what's up? Yeah. Yeah. So I will be finishing this film this month, and hopefully you guys will get to see it next year.
Awesome. We tell your AD what makeup used to tell me when I AD'd, which is 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
5 more
Literally,
minutes.
I just gave her a look. I was like, yo.
Yeah. 5 more minutes for makeup is like that shit where your buddy calls you and you're like, where are you? And you're like, I'm 5 minutes away, but you haven't left your house yet.
Yeah.
That's fucking makeup. So
Yeah.
all right, you guys have been incredible. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the Q&A on this. I'll see a lot of you in person and as soon as the festival kicks off. And for the audience, thanks again for coming on the ride. Tell your friends and family about these movies. They're amazing filmmakers with really unique voices working and celebrating culture and life in Florida and talking about really important issues. So we thank all of them for joining us. We thank all of you for sticking around for the end of the Q&A, and we'll see you on the next one.